there is this big question of whether or not America has chosen a king based on what we're seeing. And I want to speak to you plainly, not politically, not emotionally, as some people are doing right now, but prophetically, because there are moments in history like now when things shift, and they're not shifting loudly, they're not shifting suddenly, but they're quietly enough that only those watching the signs of the times can recognize what is really happening. And I believe we are living in one of those moments right now in 2026. There's a discussion taking place about the naming of a living American leader onto the US currency, which is Donald Trump. To many people, that sounds harmless, it sounds symbolic, even patriotic, especially to the MAGA crowd, but to students of prophecy, to those who understand the messages of revelation, and to those who have been reading the warnings given through scripture, through the scrolls, and through prophecy. What is happening here is not symbolism. It is a signal. It is a sign. It is a question mark hanging over the future of the United States of America. Because the America of prophecy was never supposed to have kings. America was raised up without a crown. And when this nation was born, it was different from every power that came before it. And you should know that based on prophecy. Europe had kings. Rome had emperors. The world had, different parts of the world had rulers who governed by authority over conscience. But America was raised up by the Most High to be something new. It was raised up to be a refuge, a shelter, a land where people could worship according to the conviction, not coercion, not people telling you how to do it and when to do it. A place built on two pillars, and I spoke about them before: civil liberty and religious freedom. That is what we call today republicanism and Protestantism. There was never intended to be no pope in the church, no king in the state. And that combination made America unique in prophecy. So Revelation describes this nation as a lamb-like power, very gentle, young, different from the beast that ruled before it. But the prophecy does not stop there. If you go into the prophecy, it says the lamb changes its voice. The scripture says that this lamb would one day speak like a dragon. So think about it. The same nation that begins by protecting conscience will eventually control conscience. The same nation that protects liberty will eventually restrict your liberty. And so it goes on that the same nation that rejects monarchy or having a king will begin to reflect the authority structure of the very kingdoms it once escaped. So this is not, if you think this is not my interpretation, that is prophecy I am giving to you. And prophecy moves very slowly at first. Then it begins to move suddenly. And you have to ask yourself now, why symbols matter more than we think. Some people say it's only a name on a currency. It's only Donald Trump's name on a currency. But history tells a different story. If you know history, when rulers place their image or name on a national money or currency, they are making a statement about what? About authority. And if we go back in history, you see that Caesar did it. That's right, Caesar. Kings did it, different kings. Empires did it as well. Currency declares who, what, represents the nation. It declares who embodies the power of that nation. And it also declares who defines its identity. America avoided that tradition for a specific reason because America was never meant to revolve around one man. It was meant to revolve around principle. So when you see a nation begins moving forward towards personality centered symbolism, thoughtful people who understand should pause and ask a lot of questions like changing really. And why is it changing now? Well, if you are aware, the warnings were given a long time ago, more than 100 years ago. The Most High warned that this movement would come. We were told that the principles that made America strong would not remain forever. We were told the Constitution would one day be set aside in matters of conscience, in the way you think, in the way you go about. We were told that church and state will move closer together again. And we were told a time would come when the United States would influence the world to enforce religious authority. Now, that warning was not written yesterday. That warning was written generations ago, long before many of us were born, long, long before. Let me be very clear, because when politics get into the mix, a lot of people seem to get antsy. This message is not about supporting or opposing whether Democrats or Republican, because prophecy is not about personalities. Prophecy is about direction, right? And events should not dictate prophecy. Prophecy should dictate events. This is what is happening. So it's about the trajectory. It's about where a nation is moving, not who happens to be standing at the front of it at the time. Because prophecy says, and I'm going to tell you, United States will eventually become the chief power enforcing worship legislation across the earth. That moment has not fully arrived yet. But scripture says it is come to arrive, something inside the character of the United States of America, something inside the character of this nation must change. And Revelation connects worship and economics. And there's also something else we must not ignore. In the book of Revelation, the final conflict involves buying and selling. So I want you to think about that carefully. Scriptures connects worship with economics. It connects allegiance with participation in the marketplace, for simplification there. It connects conscience with currency. So when the symbols of authority begin appearing in financial systems, all of us who are prophecy students, we should start taking notice of this, not because they fear the change or we fear any change, but because we recognize the patterns. And that brings me to the image of the beast. And many people misunderstand this part of prophecy. They think that the image of the beast is something physical. And I've been seeing a lot of people talking about that in that manner. Something visible. Something, what I say, is obvious. But if you go in the scriptures, it describes something far more serious. It describes a system, a union between religious influence and civil authority. A moment when governments begin enforcing matters of worship. That is what history looked like during the Dark Ages for many of us who have studied, really studied the prophecy. And I said, the prophecy says something similar will appear again, not in the same form as it did then, but in the same spirit. And so America's greatest test still lies ahead. The United States was raised up to defend freedom of conscience, but prophecy says it will one day test freedom of conscience. And that is the turning point. That is the moment when the Lamb begins to speak like a dragon. So when you see all the symbols that begin changing now, when you see authority begins to centralize, and when you see the national identity begins attaching itself to personalities instead of principles, I'm going to say to you that we should not panic. What we are to do in this very moment is that we should pay greater attention, because prophecy never, and I'm saying that to you, unfolds by accident. Mosiah never told his followers to be afraid of prophecy. He told us to watch, and to watch the signs, watch the movements, watch the direction of nations, because prophecy is not given to scare the church in any way. We should be preaching about it. This is the time we should be talking about it. It is given to the church to prepare. The question right now is not whether America has a king in Trump. The question is whether America is beginning to look like the kingdoms it once rejected. And also, if prophecy is unfolding the way scripture describes it. And then the most important preparation we can make right now, is not political, because Republican or Democrats, ULP, NDP, JLP, ALP, whatever, PNP, UNC, it can't save you. It is spiritual. When the final crisis comes, it will not test our opinions. It will test our loyalty. And only those whose faith is anchored in the Most High, not in nations, not in leaders, not in systems, only those people will stand. So I'm going to leave you with one question. Are we watching the signs right now, or are we sleeping through prophecy as it unfolds? That is the question that you must answer.